I'm Josh Noble. You're listening to the Talk Carby to Me podcast.
Welcome to the Talk Carby to Me podcast. My guest today is Josh Noble. He is a powerlifter, trainer, dabbles in nutrition as well. So today we're going to talk about some things. We're going to dive into, the sport of powerlifting. Obviously, it's very different than what you've heard me explain. I would categorize myself more as like a movement specialist and more of a body composition kind of niche. Josh is a little bit more into powerlifting and stuff like that. So we'll definitely pick his brain on a couple things. Talk about nutrition, how that plays a role. So like, first off, like what got you into like powerlifting as like your kind of like your thing personally?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Long overdue.
Yeah, right. And if you keep seeing me messing with my earbuds, it's because they keep trying to fall out on me. I had to use these at the last second. So if I drop one and I disappear, that's my bad. But
it's okay. I'm wearing neon glowing headsets right now. So like,
well, I have one of those, but I was like, that shit might be too big. But but anyway, so I got into the powerlifting really through. So I lifted pretty much from, your high school days. I played a little bit of college ball and then football, and then got into the CrossFit for a little bit. And then I was just lifting to lift, played a little bit of semi-pro football, and our strength and conditioning coach, it was at a powerlifting gym. And at the time I was actually going to school, like to just get my like PT cert. And I was like, hey, I was working a factory job. It was trash. Put myself there. And one day I was just like, hey man, I got to get myself out of this shit. So basically I went and got the PT cert, and I let him know. I was like, hey, anytime you need somebody, like, let me know so I could, quit my factory job while I was playing football. And so he called me one day, was like, hey man, I got enough clients for you. So long story short, I wasn't into powerlifting. There was a powerlifting gym, but then I stopped playing football, primarily because it was just like, we'd have games on Saturdays. And then, I'm still banged up on Mondays when I walk into the gym to try and train people, and, I can't bend over. I'm limping everywhere. And so I stopped playing football. I played 3 years of that. And then I wanted to compete. And so I was like, well, what am I going to compete in? Dabbled, like thought about like between like boxing or something else, but it was like, I want to stick in the strength sports. So lo and behold, I asked all my clients, I was like, do you guys want to do a powerlifting meet? And at first they were reluctant. I was like, I'm gonna have to do my homework too. And the first meet we did was in Chicago, and it was 132 people, massive meet, 5 platforms, and I had 11 clients competing, and then including myself competing for the first time. So it was a rush the first time. And but basically the main driver behind it all was just wanting to compete in something.
Yeah.
And then, powerlifting is pretty objective. So either, you lift the weight or you don't. And so you could objectively measure if you're getting stronger. So that was probably 2015, 2014, something like that. I don't remember.
That's something I appreciate that. That's what I appreciate about powerlifting. So me personally, it's not my style. It doesn't interest me in that regard. I more tend to lean towards endurance pursuits for my competition fix. But I think there's something to competition in human psychology that changes from when we're children to as we age, and the impact that it has on our lifestyle. And also like the way that we look at like society now, where some might say society now is a little bit softer and stuff like that. And I think a part of it goes into competition, right? It's that human instinct to kind of compete. Like if you look at anything in the animal kingdom, where there's this competition for food, you're fighting scarcity, you're fighting, if you're, say the animals, you're fighting for the best mate. And obviously, you look at how society's evolved over the years. I mean, technically there is this hierarchy in finding a mate and stuff like that. But when you look at back when, when we were coming up, right? You were playing sports and stuff like that, right? We didn't have as many participation ribbons. We didn't have as many, seventh place trophies and stuff like that. Uh, and I think eventually, and very similar to you, like when you're playing college ball, like me, I stopped in high school or right after high school. And after high school, I didn't really compete at anything. Like there was nothing, like I didn't have anything that kind of like triggered that desire to attempt to do something and then come short and realize that, okay, how do I progress from here? Or what's that next level look like? And you end up I ended up for years, I ended up in this little kind of space where I was just kind of chasing nothing. Um, and I think that plays like a massive role in like how we go. And so I ended up going into retail business and stuff like that. And one of the things for me, like we had scorecards again, and I was like, oh shit, there's a scoreboard again, or I'm ranked against
Yeah.
other people in the company, and like it lights that fire again, it lights that passion and stuff like that. And for some people like us are now there, it's fitness pursuits and stuff like that for that competition factor. And other people, it might be in their business life, in their daily life, they're trying to get that promotion, or they're Wall Street guy, they're trying to get X returns or anything like that. And I
Yeah.
think that plays a massive role. And I think, do you think so? Like when we talk about powerlifting and stuff like that, do you think that's one of the main draws that gets people into the powerlifting sport?
Oh, definitely, man. I think, yeah, it's. I would say that I would say 99% of the driver is just like people want to compete, and it's not just like against your peers, even though that's part of it. It's mainly against yourself. And like I have this when I talk to people who don't really know too much about powerlifting, they might know like you squat, bench, and deadlift, but it's like, for example, like if I go to, so I just competed like two or 3 weeks ago, and people at my job they were like, did you win? And I was like, well, I did win, but I didn't do as good as what I wanted to. So it's like I got first place, but my total was like 50 kilos lower than my best total. So it's like, your placing really just depends on who shows up that day. Like my
Yeah.
best total ever, I got a few years ago, and but I got like 20th place because it was a national meet. It was the best lifters really in the world, and so like I would take 20th place and get a significantly better total over getting this, first place bullshit. Basically, like you said, like a participation trophy almost, and you get a first place, but your total's lower. So it's like, did you actually do better? Like, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
Like objectively, you did not.
Yeah. It kind of leaves that seed of doubt. Like, what if Greg from Mississippi had showed up? You know what I mean?
Right, right,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's totally like the competition, though. I say for as far as powerlifters go, like yeah, it's pretty intense, man. It's awesome though. I love it, and it's just like the objectivity, and then there's different strategies too, because you get older and you just can't. You got to really kind of think about your training rather than uh, just being able to throw weight on the bar because you're 22 years old and you can look at the weight and make progress.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we look at like the different disciplines, right? So you have like, your general fitness population, like your Gen Pop. You've got your CrossFit, which has CrossFit. That's funny. CrossFit, which has
Ironic.
CrossFit, which has they've got that like super tribe mentality like dialed in. Then you have like that powerlifting community. Obviously, you have the bodybuilding community and stuff like that. Um, what do you think it is about like powerlifting that might draw someone specifically towards that sport version of fitness? And like, how does that differ from like, I'm a new client, I'm a new beginner, I come to you and I'm like, hey, I just want to lose like 10 pounds, but I want to be really strong and stuff like that. And like, take me through like what that looks like for you.
Well, like the first part of your question, how they differ, I think that there's a lot more similarities than differences. But like some of the differences are like the objective weight going up, like rather than like, you said your general, like just like, let me go to the gym type people. I want to look good. Like, yeah, like you, I mean, I guess in a way you can be objective with that, with like measurements and stuff like that. But I, I don't know. I don't. I'm struggling to think of like the major differences because it's like the people who are in powerlifting to compete. Like I said, most of them are there to compete. Like yeah, you want to win. Like that's cool and all, but most of them are there to max. Like let me see how far I can push myself. And even like your like real hardcore regular gym goers, I work out with some people that they don't compete at all, but they are in the gym busting their ass because they're in competition with themselves,
Yeah.
uh, and I every discipline or sport, you have your hardcore people, and you have your lazy people. Just because people are powerlifters doesn't mean that like they're all competitive like with themselves. Sometimes, I know people who I know they have more potential in them, but they're just not willing to give the effort. Um, and then so, what was the last part of your question?
And as far as like, so like if someone comes to you and they're like, powerlifting
Oh
seems
yeah.
interesting, but then you got like the bodybuilding world and like what does that process look like becoming either a powerlifter
So
or
really, it's not too much of a difference. It's just like it comes, the calorie intake, and what you expend and stuff means a lot more. It's more like if somebody's like, hey, I want to power lift and I want to lose 10 pounds, I'm like, cool, well, we're going to power lift and we're going to cut calories. If someone's like, hey, I like bodybuilding, I want to lose 10 pounds, I'm like, cool, well, we'll write you a bodybuilding program and we'll put you in a deficit. It's like the style of training you like plus the deficit or the bulk or whatever the goal is. It's not like I say, oh, you want to lose weight, you can't power lift. That's not it at all. I've had plenty of people like make tremendous strength gains while in a deficit. Like the further on in your career you get, the harder that is for sure. And the bigger deficit, it's harder. But like if someone's brand new and they're overweight or not even overweight, maybe just like, well, I guess like overweight, over fat, and they want to lose weight, but they want to get stronger. It's definitely in the cards as long with the caveat is that they're training, decently hard. You know,
yeah,
I've had a couple clients that they've lost like 45 pounds and all of their 1RMs went up, you know,
which is
you
awesome.
know, yeah, it's like, but it's like, it's the hard work. It's like, you got to be thoughtful and just consistency, a lot of the fitness industry, the sayings are cliche, but they're real as long as you believe in them, and you're actually doing them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so many cliches. And the funny thing is they're all rooted in some form of they're like, 10 different versions of one like really solid, like foundational thing that was said, back in the day and like carried on and you see it morph and stuff like that. Um, the as far as like so when we talk about like strength, obviously, right? So strength training is gonna be anything, right? You go pick something up heavy, you're kind of strength training, right? But when you get like super specific, right? And let's say you have an athlete that's gonna compete and things like that, like how does that process look with the exercises required for like a powerlifting meet, right? And like we from their starting point, like how do you get to, and obviously progressive overload is going to play a role in that, but like what's that method look like? If I say I'm looking to compete and I want to win first place or be in top three and stuff like that, like
Well, so first off, you know, it's okay. I tell all my clients, like, it's okay. It's like, I encourage you to have like number goals, but don't get married to them, just especially like with when you put a time constraint on something. Like if you were a little bit more broad and you said, hey, I want to say you squat 400 pounds now, and you're like, hey, by the time I'm done powerlifting in 10 years, I want to squat 500 pounds. I'd be like, all right, like that might be able to happen depending on, where you're at, is how much can we keep you healthy and whatnot. But um, more than anything, like, so depends on how long I've been working with the person. So I've had a client that I've been training for like, it's probably like 8 or 9 years now, something like that. And she just competed last fall, and she's a single mother of three, PR'd all her lifts. it's but I we have such a good rapport, and I have so much like training data on her that I know what she responds to. So like she responds to something different than like a protocol I would respond to. So the more I know about the person, the more I know this is what makes you stronger. So we're going to do this leading into a meet because so say like a traditional powerlifting cycle, I would say like it would be like your hypertrophy, your strength, and a peak block. Um, but say you run those three in that sequence, and then you get to that peak block, but you're continuously noticing like you're not getting stronger, you almost like decline. But during that like the strength phase, like your estimated 1 rep max is like trending up, trending up, trending up, then it's like, well, why not use that going into a meet rather than your peak block? So um so yeah, the more information I have on somebody, the more we really dial in on like this is we know that this is what makes X person stronger, so that's what we're going to lead into it. And we know uh, this is like their second best block leading into it. So we'll do that 2 blocks out. And the block might matter. It depends on person to person. Again, I have people that peak in like 3 weeks and I have people that peak in like 7 to 8 weeks. Again, that's like, it takes a lot of time, a lot of trial and error. But um, most people, though, I will say respond to like once it gets closer to the meet, you up the intensity or load on the bar, and then you drop the volume. I would say a lot of people do well with that, but not everybody does. So when I write my programs, I do it's like as custom to the T as possible, and that's when we first start working together. Especially if I know that they're going to compete, I lay out the process. Like, look, we're going to put out a general program that I believe will work for your goals and with your time constraint and equipment and previous injuries and all that stuff. And then we'll adjust as needed. And then, sometimes like that first program, it's like, oh shit, like we're balling right now. And then sometimes it's like, okay, well, maybe this lift is doing well, but these two aren't doing well. It's a lot of trial and error. You got to pay attention, and especially like if a person, I take a lot out of RTS, which is reactive training systems. And more specific, the owner of that, Mike Teixeira, he's like colored outside the box for so long and like uh, came up with his own style slash says like, hey, we don't have to do it like this, like just because logically this makes sense doesn't mean that in real life it's going to work, because we could make the best program in the world on paper, but then we put it to work and you don't respond well to it. And it's like, well, you should because it's a peak block. And it's like, well, it doesn't work like that all the time, unfortunately. But over time, I would say if I get a good like 6 months to a year in, like we generally get a pretty good idea of um, who can handle what volume and intensity, with those two mixed, and then like the frequency. Um, we get it nailed down pretty well. And then it's just about, like people change over time. So it's like if this worked for you this time, it doesn't mean that it'll work for you next time. However, until we know that it's not going to work for you, we'll probably run that again at some point. Um, Not sure if that answered your question at all.
No, it really does. I think one of the things too that you're talking about, like with programming and stuff like that. So you talked about hypertrophy phase, strength phase, peak phase, right? So when you get hypertrophy, obviously that's the increase in muscle mass to your body, and you're training to get that that's the end result that you're looking to get out of that part. Then you have your strength phase. And when you say peak, that's like you're looking at like what could my top lift be, right?
Well, yeah, it's more that's when you're focusing more like in a traditional peak of like you're gonna put a little bit more taxing on your central fatigue or your CNS rather than your peripheral fatigue. And so that's again generally like if you were to like type in Google like powerlifting program, that's what you would get is like you would have like towards probably 85, 88+% for doubles, singles, maybe some triples for your peak block. But yeah. It's just really like to challenge your central nervous system, so you get like more adapted to these heavy loads and prepared for that.
Yeah. The so it's good that you mentioned Google, and like literally like that's one of the things that got me actually start a podcast. Um, looking at like all the information's available at this point in the game. If you Google anything, if you Google, I want my butt to look like Nicki Minaj's butt, right? Someone out there has written a plan specifically for
Right,
that.
right, right.
Someone has written a plan to bring your bench from 100 pounds to 150, or 200 to 225, something like that. And I was doing nutrition workshops at the gym, Globo Gym, as I like to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of didn't pan out. And I'm like, well, taking an hour and you got, maybe 10 people come in, 4 people show up on time. You got to hunt down the other 4. You got to send out text messages, and it just became really annoying. And then so that I obviously left there, and that led into starting my fitness business and going in and thinking, okay, well, I can do like a Zoom call kind of workshop and kind of like a Clubhouse type vibe. And then I'm like, am I really charging for this? And then there's a transaction there, and now I'm transacting 20 times trying to get someone in there, and I was just like, fuck it, everything's out here for free. Like, let
Mm-hmm.
me just find a way to give good, reasonable, quality information to at least get people started and stuff like that. And that kind of led me down the podcast route, and here we are. So when you look at going to the gym, trying to get stronger, trying to make things happen, there's like 100 different methods that you see people preach and stuff like that. And I'm always a big believer, there's more than one ways to skin a cat, right? And the cat
Right.
still gets skinned. What do you think are some of your most effective principles that you could say that if you were giving advice to someone just getting started out and trying to get stronger, that you've seen usually work?
Well, like, like for me, when I have like a person come in, I have them fill out a intake form, which is your general questions like, uh, how long have you been training? What equipment do you have available? Um, how many days per week? How long in those days per week? Previous injuries, current injuries, stuff like that. And then obviously, most importantly, the goal. Um, but I would say like for powerlifting, one, I would say like people, it's become way more prevalent now, but I still hear about people not using auto regulation. Um, and I think that they're really like either like letting themselves overdo it or like undershoot for their potential for that particular training session. So
Yeah.
whether that's
And
like auto regulation by, go ahead.
when you say auto regulation, like what do you mean there?
So yeah. So like RPE, rate of perceived exertion, or
Yeah.
RIR, reps in reserve. Um, so you're not like going balls to the wall every day. You're lifting the right amount of weight, the right amount of times for the right amount of sets. So it's like people kind of get a little scared of it. For people who don't know, like RPE is generally out of a 1 to 10 scale. Um, most of the time, we just use 6 to 10, maybe 5 to 10. Sometimes just those get hard to judge. So basically, any rep at a 10 would be a max out. So if a one out of 10 would be like the most weight you could lift for 1 rep. A 5 out of 10 would be the most weight you could lift for 5 reps, and so forth. And then you knock it back and you say like a single. So 1 rep at a 9 would mean you have 1 rep left in the tank. A single at a 8 means 2 reps left in the tank. And, it is subjective. Um, and it's basically the same thing with RIR, reps in reserve. You just, how many more do you have left in the tank? And it's subjective, but I think it's what I've heard. The best way I've heard it described is like it's a more effective way of communication rather than saying like that was hard or that was easy. You say like that was a 9 RPE. So okay, I know that it was about 1 rep left in the tank. Because even though that's subjective, like saying that was easy is extremely subjective. So when people don't use auto regulation again, like I get like the being nervous, but you have so much autonomy for, say, you're having a really shitty day and you go in and lift, but the piece of paper says you were supposed to lift 100 pounds, but your last warm up's 90 pounds and it barely moved. Like auto regulation, a lot of auto regulation, aka common sense, um, auto regulation will tell you, don't do this, like downshift.
Yeah.
But on the flip side to that, though, um, it lets you take advantage of good days as well. So, like you say, you come in and um, you're feeling really good, and the piece of paper says lift 100 pounds, and you get to your last warm up, and you're like, oh my gosh, that was way easier. Let me try 105, and then so you exceed your goal for the day, or you're um, even more so. It's like we say, like, base this around performance instead of feeling. So it's like, say you come in shitty. This has happened to me numerous times where you come in shitty, feeling like garbage, and you record your lifts because that's generally the best way to gauge your RPE, that or a velocity reader. But um, you're feeling like trash. You come in, and then the lift to you seems like it moved like shit, but you watch that video and you smoked it. So then it's like, okay, let me add some weight to the bar. Then it kind of gives you that bump. So you're actually lifting what you should for that day. So it's lift to lift, session to session. So
Yeah.
using the auto regulation, and then generally, like, my programs. Now, if this was a brand new person never lifted, I'd probably say, like, say they wanted to lift 3 times a week, I'd probably have them squat twice, deadlift once, and a horizontal press twice and a vertical press once, unless their shoulders couldn't handle it. But if it was like a seasoned person, like, I lean towards the higher frequency. Um, so like benching, say you have a 4-day program, we'd probably bench every day, um, squat twice a week and then on a third day having like a quad specific movement, and deadlifting twice a week with some upper back stuff. I generally don't program too many accessories, like traditional accessories, unless someone asks for it.
Yeah. And that's a good segue. So that's kind of what I'm talking about, right? So we have the RIR, right? The reps in reserve, right? How many do you have left in the tank? Use the RPE. I think one of the things that kind of gets people confused a lot. You see a lot of trainers out there promoted and stuff like that, and they're like, oh, you got to do time under tension, right? That's the most important indicator of like how strong you're going to get. Oh, you got to train to failure every set, because that's the thing that's going to make you stronger. It's got to be what else? It's got to be blood flow restriction, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to do it. You got to do this ice bath. There's like all these things, and like personally, so like the way you just talked about it, like some kind of horizontal push and things like that, right? So my training style, what it's evolved into, I usually, if I got a new person, we're just going to focus on like the shapes and the movement patterns, right? So do you have access to do something that looks like a squat? Great. If not, then
Right.
we need to create that. Can you horizontally press? Great. If you can't, why not? Let's fix that. Let's create space for your body to move throughout your
Mm-hmm.
area, right? And then obviously, what can you do vertically and stuff like that. And then once you kind of have that pattern in, I'll start to make things a little bit heavier. And one of the things that I like to do with beginners only is I'll have them move at a tempo where it looks like if they were to be underwater, right? That's how the bar is moving. So and a lot of it looks like, oh, I got to go slow or something like that. And obviously, there is some programs out there that'll have you do a focus on a big eccentric part. For me, it's not really for that. For me, it's like, I want you to move through this pattern with control, right? You're moving it
Mm-hmm.
up, you're moving it down, you overcome gravity, you yield to it. So you understand at each point in the movement that like you're in control, you understand how to move and what happens and changes as your body goes through that shape. Of what I was talking about, and obviously so progressive overload would be the other obvious one, and things like that, right? So time under tension, blood flow, all this stuff, like kind of going through and sorting that out. Like, what do you think is most effective as far as that, or does it vary like on a case to case basis? Because obviously, like, here's my perception of it, right? So for me, if I'm looking to get a little bit stronger, if I start moving shit slow and it's a little heavier, right, I know that I'm not going to get as much out of that set, because it's going to expend more energy as I'm trying to slow that bar down, right? So that might hinder me in certain in a certain regard. And yes, there's something to that control and stuff like that. But again, also there's part of it too where like just making the bar heavier will slow it down itself without me having to try it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So like in that kind of realm, like what are your thoughts on that as far as like what might be the bread and butter or what should be the bread and butter in a world where we have like just fucking flashy lights and Kardashians just giving you, hey, do this, that, and the third.
Right. So I'm kind of glad. Well, I'm actually really glad that you kind of brought this up. I think that if rarely, I won't want to say all the time because then it'll be like counter my argument. But rarely is there a time where if somebody says this is being an absolutist, are should you listen to them? Like, so if they said like, for example, BFR is the only way to go, it's like you maybe hear them out, but like probably don't listen to them. If they said if someone said powerlifting is the only way to go, probably don't listen to them. I don't think that there is one way that is like an absolute better way than others. Like from like we'll narrow it down to like powerlifting. I have seen so many weird things move someone's one rep max. Like so many protocols, like some wild stuff. Um, I have people that they want to do XYZ, like because they seen it on Instagram or whatever, and it's like, all right, well, let me show you this training data, and it's like it's not the most fancy protocols, or like we're not lifting with bands and chains or whatever the hell else people do, and it's like, but the goal for us is to move as much weight as possible. So rarely do I get pushback. Um, I'm saying I will get very creative when people are like quote unquote off season training. If they're like, hey, I want to mix it up, I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I'll be like, more than anything, like I think from like your standpoint, I think you'd agree with this. Like you got to have the buy-in, right? So it's like, what do you want to do? Like, is there anything that you absolutely don't want to do? And then so I generally start there, and then it's like, we tried for those like off-season training blocks, we make it as fun as possible. But I do with the caveat, I tell people, hey, like we can treat this as like an off-season, but or we could go up into like an exploratory block is what we call them, and like say let's try some weird shit and see if it moves your estimated one rep max. And um, so like was it over last fall? Well, it was the end of the summer last fall. I had a guy. Um, I was like, "Hey, do you want to try some shit?" He's like, "Hell yeah, let's get weird." And I was like, just threw a bunch of AM ramps at him, and but we'd hit like a benchmark set, meaning like a single, a double, or triple, like fairly heavy, and then we threw so basically protocols I've never used before. And I just thought like, hey man, this might work. Let's see. And he's like totally cool with it. And it did work. And it's not something I ever thought that I was like before his last meet, I was like, look, man, we can do this. But I want you to know, like, I've never ever done this before for somebody running it into a meet. And um, he went 9 for 9 and PR'd every single lift. So like,
That's fucking awesome.
um, yeah, it is. So like, it's a long-winded way of saying like to answer your question is like, I don't think that there necessarily is one best way for everybody. I think it's like you got to find what works for you, man. Like
Yeah.
it's like people don't want to hear that like, well, it depends phrase, but it really does. If sure, like templates and stuff like that, there are a lot of great ones out there, but like when it comes down to it, it's like, what are your goals? What works best for you?
Yeah. Would you say so when you look at the powerlifting world specifically, would you say there's a body type specifically that might be conducive to someone doing very well in powerlifting? Or is that more so something that, a case by case thing or
The only way I would,
because you hear a lot, and one of the reasons I asked this, right? So I follow a couple trainers and PTs and stuff like that, and they have theories on thorax shape and size and pressurization of your kind of your torso. Which actually, I mean, there's some sense to it, and there's some practical applications to it too. But also, you see like there's like a lot of big, thicker guys, are powerlifting, but then you also have like women powerlifting, and you have like skinnier guys powerlifting, and like like when you look at like LeBron James, for instance, like if we put LeBron James in a powerlifting meet, you know what I mean? As far versus if you look at like the body type that, not the performance in the person, but more so the body type that like Eddie Hall has and stuff like that. When he was
So
kind of doing his thing, like is there anything to that? Do you think, or
so I would say like generally the taller you are, that would probably be the biggest knock against you. Like, um, but other than that, man, like the only thing I could say is like what we've seen is generally the more muscular the people are. If you look at like the top lifters in the weight class, their weight classes, the more muscular, not the most, because there are some fucking jacked ass people that just aren't as strong. Um, but generally, the more muscular people are going to be your stronger people, even though it's a strength sport and not necessarily like a physique sport. But then the taller people, that has a knock against them just because like your squat and your deadlift. Well, I mean, generally all three, because you're gonna have to bench with longer arms. You're gonna have to travel the bar farther for squat and deadlift. I mean, those two specifically, like um, especially the squat. Somebody who's like, I've seen people that are like 6'9" in competitions, and like it, they have a long way to travel with that weight to go down
oh,
and back up.
hell yeah. I was last not last summer, summer before, I was training one of the Duke basketball players for the off season,
Mhm.
because the school had shut down, and they had shut down like their summer gym because of the pandemic or some kind of regulation there. So in the off season they had to go somewhere. So training him for a little bit. He was 6'8". And one of the biggest things I noticed was the deadlift at his height was definitely something that was, as far as getting him into like a good shape. Um,
Yeah,
where he had some good leverage was definitely a tricky thing. So obviously I had to make the bar a little bit taller, but that was one definite notice that I saw, especially
right.
with the taller guys.
Yeah, and we have them. I just the meet I just did a couple weeks ago. There was a guy. He was like 6'6" there, but I mean, you just accept it. It's like you can't really do shit about it. Like, and
Yeah.
you're choosing to be in a sport where you're at a disadvantage. So it's like it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think there's also, I kind of like you were talking about, like with your exploratory blocks, I kind of like the pick and pop thing. The thing that I like to play with is power elements, right? So, um, and when I say power, I'm talking more like speed, how fast things are moving, right? So,
Hmm.
we'll have, we're just getting stronger. We're really locked in. Here's a good pattern. Now we're making it heavy. And then occasionally I'll mix in a drill. I like to use medicine balls, like to do throws and stuff like that. But there's a couple throws that'll mimic the same shapes, um, as like a hinge, right? So if you do an overhead slam and you're bending mostly at the hip, right, that's going to look just like your RDL deadlift. It's just a really fast one. Same thing with like
Right.
a kettlebell swing. And I like to introduce some of those variables to to switch up that pattern and kind of see if that stimulus in a different way kind of gives them more feedback to a certain muscle group, or like we're like, I'll give you an example. Like if we're doing RDLs and like I really, really feel your glutes and stuff like that, and as they're going through their RDL, like maybe they can't feel it or they're not feeling it as much on the way up. But you go into a kettlebell swing and everyone's like, "Oh, my glutes are burning here," right? So that speed factor kind of plays a role. So I kind of like getting into that stuff there, mixing it, and that's something that. And sometimes you honestly you do have to get a little weird. I think especially when like for us, like you could write me a program for 365 days and it could be the same exact thing as, and just like, oh, I have to do 5 reps today, 5 reps today, but just up the weight 1% every single time, and I'll just follow it. Like I'll be fine. I'm good
Hmm.
with it. I might have like maybe 1 or 2 days where I deviate and stuff like that, but for some people, like you go in and you're like, "Oh, I want to have fun when I work out," and stuff like that. And it's one of those things where it's like, I always tell people like, it's fitness isn't necessarily fun. Like you might go in and maybe on half your days in a month, you might feel good as you're going through that workout. Like the end result feels good, right? But you're not going into every workout. You're not going to feel your best. You might be off. You might have an off day. You might have slept wrong. You might have got stuck at work. Something like that might have thrown you off. So, um, a lot of people, like they get stuck in like the monotony and stuff like that. And the unfortunate thing is like that's usually what gets you the most result, because it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I've done exercise one, I've perfected exercise one, and part of it, like there's a skill acquisition that goes along with it. So, if you're mixing everything up, constantly or too fast, or you're bored after 2 weeks of a block and stuff like that. Like it becomes like really, really hard to progress. So you kind of got to take those things with like a grain of salt. And maybe you have, one kind of exploration kind of thing. And I guess the person really matters. But that's one of the things that like I've had to like kind of teach people a little bit is like, hey, some of this might be the exact same thing for 2 months. And then we might take like a week where we fuck around a little bit. But then we're going right
Right.
back to what works. You know what I mean? And we're just going to make it just a little bit heavier, and squeeze that progressive overload out of it. Um, I think a good way that I like to look at it, right? So I'm kind of a nerd. I play video games a lot. That's like really the only time that I can turn my brain off, especially coming out of a corporate environment for the last couple of years. Actually, a couple corporate environment for like ever, minus like the 2 year break, which was the COVID year and the another year where I was in between training certifications and stuff like that. If you look at like a role playing game, like so, let's use what's probably the most popular one. You look like the Pokemon video game. You start at the beginning, and you got this. You're introduced to this end game state, right? Where the end game state is you're the best trainer in the world. Everyone knows Ash Ketchum and Pikachu. They set on their journey, right? So when you look at like progressing and progression, what it is like for the entire time you're playing the game does not change. The only difference is when you go into area one, things are a little easier, right? And if you were to just stay at area one for the entire time that it would take you to go through the whole process, you wouldn't get anywhere, right? So you have to go to the area two. Area two, things become a little bit tougher, right? And so on and so forth. And you kind of go through that progression towards your ultimate goal.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of times, like especially with you see the crazy shit on TikTok, you see it on Instagram, you see people trying to go viral for clicks, for likes, and things like that, and things like that. I think a great example, who is it? One of the Kardashians. I think it was Courtney. Courtney, maybe Chloe. Don't quote me on that. I don't follow them too much. She posted a workout with her trainer, and her trainer was just like looked like the sloppiest trainer of all time, and she was doing fuck all. I don't know what the hell she. It looked like a training video from like 2001. He's like, oh, this is the best way to like do this, that, and the third, and it was just absolute trash. And anyone who has any understanding of movement patterns, you're like, what the hell?
Hmm.
Um, and when you kind of go back in, it's like they want that. Oh my God, this looks crazy. I saw this guy do that, and like that doesn't actually work. But the guy did it for videos, and the guy happens to be in shape because he has a pretty solid program
Oh yeah.
that's too boring to make a TikTok about or an Instagram reel
Mhm.
about and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the things that are hindering folks and stuff like that. And I think if you look at like I actually stopped posting on Instagram as much for that reason because literally I'll be sitting there and I'm like I've had the same upper body day for the last 3 months. Like, yeah, the weight is a little different and stuff like that, but I prefer to be a little bit more instructional. I'm not going to be out here like flexing abs, like showing booty pics and stuff like that, or like have like a booty pose or stuff like, oh, look at my sick pump and stuff like. I'm not that guy. And it's like, well, how many times do you want to see me do an upper body day and stuff like that? And I think when you look at, and obviously, like I'll scroll through the gym reels and stuff like that, and I'll see, what are people doing? And sometimes you'll catch a gem, diamond in the rough. It's like, oh, that was actually pretty decent. I'll try that out. And other times you see like there's just bombardment of like just nonsense that people are doing.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of just stuff out there that's just like it's just about views. Like they want to get paid or be famous or what. I don't know. I'm so far out of the loop on that shit. Like I almost gag every time I choose to post on Instagram. Like it's so far outside of me. But it's like, but it's not all bad though. I mean, like for me, like I've met so many people traveling or training and competing like throughout the country, and it's just a way to keep up, like with people's lifts and shit like that. So it can be good, but you just got to be careful. Like, I'm sure you've had clients like you kind of just like pointed at it, where it's like, well, I seen this, this, and this, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's
I,
just
I
like,
literally, I hate that so much. Oh my God, that grinds my gears. And I'm like, I was like, just, even if you don't believe me, just trust me for 1 month and just
yeah,
do it my way for 1 month and we'll talk about it. And if you're right, and this guy on Instagram was right, we'll do it that way from then. And I'll consider myself taught a lesson. Um, and honestly, like by comparison, like not a lot of the stuff, like I usually ends up there like, oh, you were right, or they'll go like, oh, I met with a
yeah,
chiropractor and they told me this, and I was like, yeah, I tell you that every day, and they're like, I didn't believe you. I'm like, what the fuck?
yeah.
So
It's like
it's
it's weird because it's like, well, you're paying me. Like what? Like
Yeah,
why are
yeah.
you?
It's like,
You're not paying this dude on Instagram or this chick on Instagram, and it's like, but you want to believe them because, like, I guess it's because they have however many followers, and a bunch of like likes on it or whatever. It's just like so that gives it credibility.
yeah. Uh,
But
you would appreciate one of our earlier episodes. We were talking about like things that we absolutely hate in the gym that need to die. And my thing was exercising with a Bosu ball.
oh yeah, you
And
know how I feel about those.
dude, so it got me thinking back when we worked together and we were talking about we turned phrased that like the guy that invented it was Jeff Bosu, like a play on Jeff Bezos. And dude,
Hmm.
the amount of exercises that happen with Bosu balls are
Oh yeah,
wild.
yeah.
Like sometimes some certain things are so fucked up that like you become like kind of impressed and you're like, how the fuck did you even do that? Like it's weird. Like you would never
Right,
recommend it,
like
but
some
you're like,
circus shit.
yeah, you're like, what? And then obviously, we both worked at Globo Gym, so we saw a lot of, standing on Bosu balls, doing bicep curls and shit. Um, and like, is there anything like that for you, or are you much like me, where like the Bosu ball is the thing that like needs to be
Uh,
eviscerated, or
nah,
like,
that's yeah. The boat. I mean, the Bosu ball by far is number one for me. I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of like good application for it, like somewhere maybe if it's your last option. But no, that's pretty much it. It's powerlifting is pretty basic when it comes to like obviously the movements and the equipment we use. So it's like I don't think that there's anything on the Bosu ball level. I could be wrong. I'm sure there. No, man, I've seen some real stupid shit. Oh man, I forgot what it was called. It was called like the X Bar 360 or some shit. I don't know, but basically it was this dude that was just juiced out of his mind, and he put 30 pounds of muscle on his frame because he grabbed these resistance bands and pulled against it. I don't know. It was bad. Or the shake weight. The shake weight's pretty. When that was
shake weight?
around, man.
Shake weight is legendary.
Right.
Dude, when that was around, so I went to my grandmother's house one day. I think we were there for like an event or something, or maybe like a holiday, or just checking in. And she's like, "Oh, I got a shake weight," and she's like, old school Puerto Rican woman, like love her to death, like rest in peace. And I was like, "Oh my god, like what do you do with a shake weight?" Like, I
Yeah.
was like, have you tried it? Did it work? Like, how do you feel? Like, tell me about it. Like, but it's just it's insane. Shake weight on a Bosu ball possibly
Hey, man.
could be the
While the
movement.
trainer's throwing it at the client.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was the one that got me. I specifically remember when I look back and there was like legit like 70-year-olds standing on a Bosu ball while one of the trainers were throwing weights at them and they were having to catch them. And I was like, what in the fuck is going on?
So it's funny that you mentioned that because I've seen one other person do that, and his name is Alvin Kamara, and he's the running back for the New Orleans Saints. Right.
Right.
So he's standing so he's not so he's standing 1 foot at a time on a Bosu ball. He's like at the maybe 10% into what a single leg squat would look like, or a pistol squat. And his trainer's throwing these little like stress balls at him. So they're not even weighted, right? Because
Hmm.
obviously common sense tells you if you're throwing heavy shit around, that's going to increase your injury risk. But like that's the only time where I might be able to say, okay, maybe for Alvin Kamara, he might get some kind of feedback from
Right.
that situation going on, because if you look at his day job,
Yeah.
he's going to be like, bouncing all over the place, people are hitting from the side and things like that. So
Sure.
um yeah, they definitely take liberties with that thing, and it's like, dude, like we're not here to kill people.
Well, it's like, yeah, you have somebody that's like one of the best athletes in the world, like, and you do anything with them, you could, I don't know, whatever dumbass exercise that has no application to what they actually do, and it's going to seem like the greatest idea ever, just because it's like somebody like in my industry that like the powerlifting scene that like say you have a trash coach, and I hate to be on the negative, but this happens. You have a trash coach, but they get this like genetic freak and But so this genetic freak is making crazy progress at what they're doing, and it's like this coach really thinks that they are fucking on it and getting it, and it's like a 2-year-old could write their program, and this person would probably make progress. But it's
Yeah.
like the difference is like these, yeah, just like the ego that they grow, like, oh, like, but look at my lifter. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like,
So
like
yeah.
it's cool, but it's like novelty cool.
So when you guys, so as a powerlifting coach, right, when you go to meets and stuff like that with your clients, stuff like that, like, and we could talk a little bit more about that scene and events coming up and stuff like that that you're involved in. But like, do you guys have like that? Oh, this is our squad, like almost like the West Side Story, like where they're snapping and like there's beef constantly, or like a little maybe like a little subtle competitive beef.
Oh, there's like basically, are you saying are there clicks
Like
or?
like yeah, obviously you got like the team dynamic in there and it's a competition and stuff like that, like, and I'm more so and approaching it like more of a funny way than I am like, a serious way as far as like, considering
I would
beef and
say
stuff
that
like that,
there's
but
like
like
there's definitely friendly beefs, like, but at the same time, I think with like I don't know, I think with like Instagram and like it makes it seem a lot worse than what it actually is. But like as far as like the competitions I've personally been to, I've never seen no like ill-mannered shit. Like,
yeah.
I'm sure it's happened, and maybe one of my meets it's happened. I don't know, but I personally have never seen anything like that. Generally, it's a pretty good atmosphere.
Yeah, so you got, all right, so I see the hoodie on, right? We got the Noble Performance hoodie, right? The thing
Hmm.
looks legit. Super funny, right? So back when I was working at a Global Gym, right? You had already moved on. I did see a couple of your clients like rocking the shirts, and I was like, "Oh shit!" I was like, "It's dope." Like, I like that. The
Yeah,
red, you got the white lettering. Like, is that
I'm
available
like,
for sale,
I
or
mean, yeah,
or
but
is that
it's
like a
like I
one of
just
one
have
for you?
what's that?
Is that like a one of one for you, or is that like,
No, I have some. I have some in stock. I don't do a fantastic job of marketing and advertising, so it's like my clients know that I have them, so they'll
yeah?
hit me up.
So I see you posting a lot about what's it called, the Rollywood Rumble. Like, what is that, and like, what's going on with that event?
So that was the one we did in the fall. This one coming up February 25th is called the Oak City Open. Um,
Okay.
USA Powerlifting. I think all of our lifters are raw this time, meaning there's no suits and there's no wraps either. So we have Bucked Up Fitness and Carry. We're having we have 84 plan lifters to be on 2 platforms. We
Ooh.
have a ton of sponsors, local and um, uh, a pretty big. So Pioneer Fitness or Pioneer Leather, they make belts. They're pretty big in the powerlifting world, but they helped us out as well. Um, but yeah, man, we've that's coming up. We generally host 2 a year. The Carolinas are huge for powerlifting. Carolinas and then Virginia, like we have some strong ass people here. Like
Yeah.
it's wild.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know, man. I mean, I think that just like I think more people are exposed to the sport here. Um, it's like so like Jen Thompson, shit. I think she's won literally like 50 world titles. She's here. Natalie Richards. Um, she is, if not the strongest drug tested female in the world. She's one of them right now. Same with Jen. Jen's probably like number. We probably have like in the female side, we probably have 3 or 4 of the top 10 strongest females on the tested side, at least in the Carolinas. And
Wow,
then even
that's
like the guys, I think we have the number 2. I think Jamar's number 2 in his weight class in the world. And then we just have like they're like so much farther above everybody else, but the people who are the tier below them are just freaks as well. It's just there's like Jamar, for instance, is squatting damn near 800 pounds at I think his last meet he did 100. He weighed in at the the 82.5 kilos weight class, so that's like 181.8 pounds, squatting damn near 800.
damn.
Yeah, it's weird. He's a tank, but I mean, but like I said, like it's even like I hate to say just like local level lifters, but they're just like the Jamar, Jen, Natalie, Celine down in South Carolina. Uh, they're just so much farther ahead of everybody else on the tier below them. But those people at the tier below are like, they're insane as well. You
Yeah.
know, um, but I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, I think it's just like people getting exposed to it, and then especially now, like with Instagram and all the other social media platforms, like people like they want to feel like they're part of a community, and then on top of that, it's like for the people who want the insta fame, it's a way to get like possibly be insta famous, so they want to stick with it.
Yeah. There is also something to that old saying, iron sharpens iron. Right.
Yeah.
So when you look
Oh
at that
yeah.
to training partners, your tribe, your community, anything like that, like if you're around some bad motherfuckers, you're going to be a bad motherfucker. You know what I mean? If you're around people that get after it constantly, like you're getting after it, right? And that's in anything. That's in life. That's in friendships, relationships. That's in powerlifting, bodybuilding, anything like that. You know what I mean? So um, that
I
tribe
think
mentality
that
really takes in.
that's actually, I'm glad you said something like that, because actually, like, because I generally just hate on social media because I'm not a fan. But to something you just said though, like the iron sharpens iron, like through like Instagram and stuff, you can keep up like with maybe somebody that you compete against, and you can see like, hey, or like your friends, like, oh shit, they're out there grinding, like I wanted somebody could be like, I wanted to take the day off, but I seen so and so like post in the gym, and so like that, it could be a motivating factor as well.
Oh yeah, big time. And that's a good thing. Like let's talk about motivation. Like motivation fades. Like we all, as experienced, fitness professionals, we know that fades quicker than it starts out like, oh my god, yeah, I want this great goal, and 2 weeks later that's gone, and it's just hopefully you built the habit quick, or hopefully you've been able to discipline and like you built a plan that made sense for you, right, as you were getting started and things like that. But feeding off other people. Right. So like you see someone, that you're competing with, or you see someone that, you're running with, or someone that like, might be on stage at a bodybuilding show or something like that. You see them like on a day where you don't feel like you don't have it. You're tired. It's been a long day. It's been a rough night. And then you see them like just getting after it. You're like, damn, I got to get after it too. Right. That
Yeah, I
motherfucker
mean,
working. And I was talking about this last episode with my buddy Kevin, who's an endurance runner, and we were talking about running in the snow. And one of the things that draws us to running in the snow is that most people won't run in the snow when it's snowing and when it's inclement weather, when it's cold and stuff like that. Like that herd thins out real quick. And there's something to that as far as like, okay, we got this. I'm putting in work. I'm busting my ass and stuff like that. And that's all that needs to become a lot of where you get your motivation from. It doesn't need to be completely where it comes from, to keep you going. But on some bad days, you can definitely draw from that pool a little bit.
well, I think it's for me personally, it's like a lot more satisfying when you do something that you don't want to do, or
Mm,
like motherfuckers aren't going to do.
yeah,
They're not gonna like they're like it's like you know I don't know. I don't personally feed off of like what other people are doing. I just like for me it's all about like maximizing me. Like that's literally all I care about when it comes to competition. I hope everybody the best, but I don't give a shit. Like I'm trying to do as well as I possibly can,
yeah.
So
I'm in that
there's
same
just
ball.
something. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, you good. I cut you off there.
I was just saying there's just something to doing, something that it's just like that feeling when after you've done something that you just don't want to do, or that like other motherfuckers took the easy way out, and it's just like, it's just like I don't know, that shit drives me, man. Like it's
Yeah.
just like
Other,
it's just there's too many regular ass people out there that are okay with it, and that's fine if you are, but it's just like that's just not for me. That's not who I am, and I really a lot of people I associate is the same way. They're shit. Most of my friends they're in the powerlifting community, so it's just like um, not everybody's like that, but a good portion of the people are just like, yeah, like let's get after it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You got to have some dogs around you. That's for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. I don't really care for my physique, to be honest with you. I don't really care if I'm putting up max lifts or anything like that. When I do like a sparring race or something like that, like obviously I want to do well. And that's one of the things I strive for and things of that nature. I don't feed off of like other people like doing well and stuff like that. If that makes sense, like I'm happy for everyone. Like if you went to the gym and you went if you just walked into the gym, I'm happy for you. If you took a mirror selfie in the gym, even if like whether it looks great, whether it looks bad, like I'm happy for you because again, that shit takes balls to kind of put that shit out there sometimes too. Um,
Right.
I do feed off like negative situations. I find a lot of like when negative things happen and I'm doing
Oh
something
yeah,
different, I'll
for
find a
sure.
way to bring that shit into it and use it as fuel. High fives and cheers don't really do much for me. I personally don't really celebrate anything myself. Um, but like if there's fucked up things happening that affect me in a negative manner, I've channeled that into being able to just use that as like a monster energy drink. Um, so it's definitely very interesting how people perceive it. But yeah, some definitely good stuff that we covered. Wish you the best of luck. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Glad to be on, man. Glad to see you're doing this and you're enjoying it.
So far, so good. Definitely a new skill, but it's been enjoyable. So we'll keep
I
at it.
bet, man. You get better as time goes.